In this video, we're diving into some of the most spine-chilling, jaw-dropping, and downright terrifying encounters between humans and wild animals. It was July 29th, 1994, at the Alaska Zoo in Anchorage, a day that would go down in infamy. Enter Catherine Warburton, a 29-year-old tourist from Sydney, Australia, who had traveled all the way to Alaska for a taste of adventure. Armed with a camera and an insatiable passion for wildlife photography, she set her sights on the zoo's star attraction, Binky, a 1,200-pound polar bear with a reputation as both a local icon and a furry force of nature. Binky wasn't just any bear, he was a legend. Orphaned near Cape Beaufort in 1970, he had called the Alaska Zoo home for decades. As a cub, he had charmed villages across the North Slope, meeting children and basking in the limelight. But as he grew, so did his instincts. He wasn't just a cute zoo resident, he was a powerful predator. The proof? He once bit off a zoo worker's finger. Yet, despite his track record, visitors remained captivated by him. Catherine was no exception. Determined to get the ultimate close-up shot, Catherine made a decision that, in hindsight, was less brilliant photographer and more bad life choice. Ignoring every zoo safety guideline ever written, she climbed over not one, but two protective barriers. With her camera in hand and her confidence sky high, she positioned herself just feet away from Binky's enclosure. Binky, the apex predator that he was, didn't need an invitation. In a flash, he lunged through the bars, clamping his massive jaws onto Catherine's thigh. Chaos erupted. She screamed. The crowd gasped. Binky, unfazed, held on like a bear possessed. Visitors rushed to help, waving sticks, shouting, and trying every bear distraction technique they could think of. Some called for a tranquilizer gun, but before it came to that, Binky decided he'd had enough. He let go, leaving Catherine with a broken leg, a severely bitten thigh, and a newfound appreciation for zoo barriers. From her hospital bed, Catherine reflected on the incident with brutal honesty. That was the dumbest thing I've ever done. Meanwhile, Binky, the undisputed king of the enclosure, basked in his newfound glory. The next day, a now iconic photo captured him proudly, holding Catherine's shoe in his mouth, as if it were a championship trophy. The image went viral before viral was even a thing. In the summer of 2011, a group of British teenagers set off on what was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime. An epic, month-long Arctic expedition in the frozen wilderness of Svalbard, Norway. Organized by the British Schools Exploring Society, BSES, this trip promised a thrilling mix of science, survival, and snow. The teens were eager to witness the majestic polar bear in its natural habitat, study the effects of climate change, and make unforgettable memories. Unfortunately, what started as an awe-inspiring expedition quickly spiraled into a nightmare, one that tragically cost the life of 17-year-old Horatio Chappell, a bright young man with dreams of becoming a doctor. The group, consisting of 80 students, arrived in Svalbard filled with excitement. They were reassured by the trip organizers that strict safety measures were in place to keep them protected in one of the world's most extreme environments. Tripwires equipped with small explosive mines were set up around their campsite to deter wildlife, pen flares were on hand to scare off any unwanted visitors, and an adult leader carried a firearm, just in case. But as it turned out, those safety precautions weren't quite as foolproof as they seemed. Shortly after setting up camp, the group discovered some major problems with their equipment. First, there weren't enough pen flares to go around, leaving many students without a crucial line of defense. Then, they realized that some of the tripwires, the ones meant to detect and scare away approaching bears, were either faulty or improperly set up. To top it off, the group leader's firearm wasn't exactly modern. It was an old rifle, far from ideal for a life-or-death emergency. And then, in the early hours of August 5th, the worst-case scenario became a horrifying reality. A starving polar bear, likely struggling to find food due to the rapidly changing Arctic ecosystem, wandered into the campsite. Driven by desperation, it ignored its usual instinct to avoid humans, and instead saw an easy meal. The bear entered the camp undetected, creeping toward the tents where the teenagers were fast asleep. Then, all hell broke loose. The bear tore into Horatio's tent, launching a frenzied attack. One of his companions was bitten on the head before the bear turned its focus on Horatio. In the chaos, Horatio was dragged from the tent and brutally mauled, while his terrified friends scrambled for safety. The entire camp erupted in panic. Screams echoed across the icy landscape as the bear continued its rampage, injuring 4 other members of the expedition, including 2 adult leaders who desperately tried to stop the attack. But their outdated rifle wasn't exactly cooperating. They struggled to fire, desperately trying to take down the beast. After a tense and terrifying struggle, they finally managed to shoot and kill the bear, but it was too late. Horatio was gone. The news of the tragedy sent shockwaves across the world, raising serious questions about the safety protocols of such high-risk expeditions. A trip designed to inspire and educate had instead exposed the fatal consequences of poor planning. Faulty equipment, insufficient training, and an unreliable firearm had left the group vulnerable to one of nature's most powerful predators. For Horatio's family and friends, the loss was unimaginable. He was a bright, compassionate young man on the verge of adulthood, eager to make a difference in the world. His death became a heartbreaking reminder of the unpredictability of nature and the immense responsibility required when venturing into its domain. Horatio's story remains a chilling chapter in the history of exploration, a reminder that while the wilderness is breathtakingly beautiful, it is also ruthlessly unforgiving. Those who knew him continue to honor his memory, remembering his adventurous spirit and love for discovery. On May 28, 2016, what should have been an ordinary day at the Cincinnati Zoo turned into a worldwide debate that still echoes today. A 4-year-old boy, Isaiah Dickerson, managed to slip past the barriers of the gorilla enclosure, leading to a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Unfortunately, this led to the death of Harambe, a 17-year-old 400-pound western lowland silverback gorilla, sparking outrage, arguments, and even internet memes. Isaiah's parents, Dayon Dickerson and Michelle Gregg, were with a group of children at the zoo. As they were about to leave the gorilla exhibit, Isaiah had a sudden burst of curiosity, declaring his dream of swimming with the gorillas. While his mother was busy keeping an eye on the other kids, Isaiah saw his golden opportunity and made his move. In a matter of seconds, he managed to climb over the barrier and plummet 10 feet into the enclosure's moat. A loud splash was followed by someone screaming, "Oh my God, there's a kid in there!" Panic quickly spread as visitors gasped at the shocking sight. Isaiah, now sitting in front of a massive gorilla, and not just any gorilla, Harambe. Video footage later revealed the tense moments that followed. Harambe dragged Isaiah through the water by his leg, while the crowd screamed in terror. Yet, at times, the interaction seemed almost gentle. Some onlookers believed Harambe was protecting the child, even standing guard over him and at one point appearing to hold hands with Isaiah. However, Cincinnati Zoo director Thane Maynard later explained that the gorilla was growing agitated by the chaotic environment. Though Harambe wasn't attacking Isaiah, his sheer strength and size made the situation extremely unpredictable. The zoo's dangerous animal response team was faced with an agonizing choice: how to save Isaiah without further escalating the situation. They ultimately decided to fatally shoot Harambe, determining that a tranquilizer would take too long to act and could make Harambe react unpredictably. The decision sent shockwaves across the world. The public erupted in anger, with many questioning whether the killing was truly necessary. Animal rights activists and outraged citizens quickly mobilized, launching the online petition Justice for Harambe, which gathered over 350,000 signatures. Criticism wasn't just directed at the zoo. Isaiah's parents faced an onslaught of blame, particularly Michelle Gregg, who was accused of negligence. Social media was ablaze with furious posts, with some demanding an investigation into the family. Things got even messier when Isaiah's father, Dayon Dickerson, was dragged into the controversy. News outlets dug into his past, revealing a history of burglary and drug-related charges. Some critics used this as fuel to further vilify the parents, while others defended Dayon, arguing that he had turned his life around and was a committed father. Close friends vouched for him, describing him as a man who had left his troubled past behind to focus on his family. In the wake of the backlash, Isaiah's family released a statement expressing their gratitude to the zoo for acting swiftly, acknowledging the difficulty of the decision. "We know this was not easy for them, and they are grieving the loss of Harambe," they stated. Despite the mounting pressure, the family chose to remain silent afterward, declining all interview requests. Meanwhile, the Cincinnati Zoo stood firmly by its decision. Director Maynard emphasized that protecting Isaiah was their top priority, and that tranquilizing Harambe would have put the child at greater risk. However, this tragic event also cast a spotlight on the zoo's security measures. Critics questioned whether the gorilla enclosure was truly safe if a 4-year-old could breach it so easily. This led to increased scrutiny, especially after reports emerged of previous safety lapses at the zoo, including an incident where 2 polar bears had briefly escaped their enclosure. Harambe's death also became a rallying cry for animal rights organizations. The group Stop Animal Exploitation Now, Say Ian, filed a complaint with the USDA, arguing that the zoo had violated the Animal Welfare Act. If a 4-year-old child can get through the barrier, is that a safe barrier? Questioned Sayan spokesperson Michael Budke. Public mourning for Harambe quickly took on a life of its own. Social media flooded with tributes, and a Facebook group titled Justice for Harambe gained thousands of members in record time. For many, Harambe became a symbol of the complex and often troubled relationship between humans and captive animals. But while the world mourned his loss, a small piece of Harambe lived on, his genetic legacy. Though he had not yet reached full maturity or bred, his sperm was collected posthumously for potential future use. Picture this. It's March 5th, 2019, in the sleepy little village of Z, tucked away in the eastern Czech Republic. The kind of place where the loudest sounds are a rooster crowing or a tractor puttering along. That is, until Mikhail Prek arrived. Mikhail wasn't your average villager. At 34, he had gained a reputation, and not in a good way. His hobby wasn't something simple like fishing or woodworking. No, he had a passion that made people question his sanity, keeping lions. Not just one, but 2, a male and a lioness. Why? No one knows. Maybe he watched The Lion King one too many times or just wanted to stand out. But owning these massive predators wasn't enough for him. He had bigger plans. He wanted to breed them. In his backyard. His enclosures, if you could even call them that, were more of a chaotic DIY project than a secure habitat. They were hastily thrown together, probably held up by sheer willpower. The problem? He had no permits. Authorities fined him, neighbors complained, yet Michael ignored them all. To him, these lions weren't just exotic pets, they were family. Big, 400-pound, clawed and fanged family. But keeping lions wasn't his only eccentricity. He also walked them. Imagine strolling through a quiet village and seeing a man casually walking a lion on a leash like it's a golden retriever. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything. One infamous incident involved a cyclist who collided with the lioness during one of these bizarre outings. He ended up in the hospital. Authorities, in an absurd twist, classified it as a traffic accident. For the villagers, however, it was just another terrifying reminder of the situation they were stuck in. Years passed with no resolution. The authorities wanted the lions removed, but legal loopholes and a lack of proper wildlife sanctuaries left them powerless. Meanwhile, Mikhail refused to cooperate. He blocked officials from accessing his property and stubbornly defended his lions. The villagers lived in constant fear, trapped in an unending standoff. Then came the morning of March 5th, 2019. At around 7 a.m., Mikhail's father made a horrifying discovery. His son's lifeless body was inside the male lion's cage. Even more disturbing, the door was locked from the inside. Why did Mikhail enter the enclosure? No one knows. What was clear was that authorities now had an even bigger problem. Mikhail's body was in a cage with 2 very alive, very dangerous lions. And here's the thing about lions. They're not oversized house cats. They are apex predators, built for the kill. No one was about to risk being the next victim. In the end, there was only one solution. Authorities had to shoot both lions to secure the scene. If that wasn't tragic enough, it was later discovered that the lioness was pregnant. Mikhail's shocking death put an abrupt end to his bizarre passion, but for the villagers it also brought relief. For years, they had lived in fear, unable to do anything about the man keeping deadly predators just beyond their fences. Now, at last, the nightmare was over. In the aftermath, the mayor of Z expressed hope that this tragedy would finally lead to stricter laws on keeping dangerous animals. And indeed, the Czech government began reassessing its wildlife regulations. The country had long been a hub for illegal wildlife smuggling, a reputation it could no longer afford to ignore. Michael Preck's story serves as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of what happens when humans blur the lines between domesticity and the wild. Lions belong in the savannah, not in someone's backyard. It was a warm summer day in Beijing, China. July 23, 2016 to be exact. Miss Jiao, a woman in her 30s, decided to take a family trip to the Beijing Badaling Wildlife Park, a popular spot where visitors can drive through enclosures and see wild animals up close. Along for the adventure were her mother, Miss Jiao's husband, and their child, all eager for a thrilling day among exotic creatures. As they cruised through the park, Miss Jiao started feeling carsick. Now, here's where things took a turn for the worse. Despite multiple warnings to stay in the car, seriously, they really stress this rule, she decided she needed some fresh air. So, she stepped out and walked over to the driver's side to speak with her husband. Out of nowhere, a massive Siberian tiger lunged at her from behind, grabbing her and dragging her away from the vehicle. It was pure chaos. Seeing this horrifying scene unfold, Miss Jiao's mother instantly reacted. Without hesitation, she leaped out of the car and sprinted toward the tiger, desperately trying to save her daughter. But before she could reach her, another tiger appeared, and this time, the outcome was fatal. The attack was over in moments. Despite her husband's frantic attempts to intervene and the swift response of park rangers, Miss Jiao's mother was tragically killed. Miss Jiao herself survived but suffered severe injuries, leaving her with deep wounds and permanent disabilities. The shocking incident, captured partially on security cameras, quickly made headlines, sparking outrage and heated debates worldwide. In the aftermath, Miss Jiao and her family sued the Beijing Badaling Wildlife Park for 1.55 million yuan, about $218,000, seeking compensation for funeral costs, medical expenses, and their suffering. Miss Jiao admitted that stepping out of the car was a terrible mistake, but she argued that the park should have done more to prevent such tragedies. An official investigation was launched, examining whether the park's safety measures were up to standard. Officials determined that the tragedy resulted from the family's decision to leave the vehicle despite the very clear warnings. Signs were posted, precautions were in place, and park staff had repeatedly emphasized the rules. However, in response to the incident, the park temporarily shut down operations to review its safety protocols. They later implemented stricter measures, banning self-driving tours in the tiger enclosure and installing even more visible warning signs. But Miss Jiao wasn't satisfied. She insisted that the park's safety measures were still lacking. She claimed the risks hadn't been properly explained to visitors and argued that the agreement they signed upon entering the park wasn't fully understood. Her father backed her up, stating that the family had felt pressured into signing the waiver without a thorough explanation of the dangers. He believed the park should have taken greater responsibility in protecting its guests, especially in such a high-risk environment. The case quickly turned into a much bigger conversation about wildlife park safety. Were these parks truly doing enough to protect visitors from deadly encounters? Could stricter regulations prevent future tragedies? The park, on the other hand, stood its ground. They argued that they had followed all necessary safety procedures and that such attacks were incredibly rare. They stressed that wild animals remain unpredictable and that visitors must take personal responsibility for following the rules. As the court battle unfolded, it became clear that there were no easy answers. Miss Jiao and her family were determined to seek justice for her mother's tragic death and the trauma they had endured. Meanwhile, the park faced intense scrutiny. struggling to maintain a balance between visitor safety and providing an authentic wildlife experience. The outcome of the case would set a precedent, not just for wildlife parks in China, but potentially around the world. It highlighted the critical importance of clear communication and strict safety protocols to protect both visitors and the animals in these unique but dangerous environments.